Yeah, here we go, y'all. Here we go. Another segment of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. And tonight we will be talking about critical race theory, also known as CRT. It's known as an academic and legal framework that denotes that systemic racism is a part of American society, from housing, from education to employment and healthcare. Tonight on Diverse Talking Heads, we will discuss critical race theory. And we are back. Host of Diverse Talking Heads podcast, and I have a panel of diverse talking heads that will discuss critical race theory with me this evening. Please welcome to the panel, Karen. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, welcome. And we also have Kaushal.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Kaushal. And we also have Charlie.
Hello, everyone. Calvin, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's jump right into this discussion. We all know that there's a lot of talk these days in the news, in the state houses, in the schools, even about critical race theory. And critical race theory recognizes that racism is more than the result of individual bias and prejudice because it's embedded in the laws. It's embedded in the laws. Some people may not agree with the, the thought that racism is embedded in American society. However, there are those that think otherwise because policies and institutions that uphold and reproduce racial inequalities do this on a daily basis. They don't have to try to get it in there. It's already ingrained. It's like when you grow a plant and you know that that plant, the fruit that's going to come from it is going to be uh, contain seeds of racism and bias and prejudice and so on and so forth. So tonight I want to start with our first question. And I'm going to ask Kaushal this first question. Why do you think it's important that we discuss racism, sexism, and other forms of systemic oppression?
Great way to lead the discussion. It's important to discuss these things because we are a country that takes pride in the phrase justice for all. And in order to achieve justice for all, we have to know about the factors that hamper justice for all. And my understanding of critical race theory is that it began as a field of legal studies. It has been going on for a decade or more, and within legal studies, critical race theory was there to point out that the iniquities caused by generations of racism have led to factors in the justice system that prevent justice, prevent us from attaining justice for all. And in order to acknowledge and do something about that, it had to be studied. You have to look at data, you have to look at outcomes. So that's why it's really important that we study this, gather data, see what the evidence says, debate on what it means and what to do about it.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for that. Charlie, the term critical race theory is being used in the media. It's being used in schools and political campaigns to, I think, misinform people, parents, and the public. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm gonna have to throw back a question to you. How do you, when you say misrepresentation, I'm not sure what that means.
Well, what I'm trying to say is we there are a certain part of the population that believes that critical race theory is based on racism, prejudice, and it should be discussed. However, there's another part of the population that believes that it's not about racism, that it shouldn't be talked about, that books that talk about racism or certain parts of American history as relates to African Americans and other brown people should not be talked about. And that's the misinformation that I'm talking about.
Okay.
But what is your opinion about that? Is this something that should be talked about for what it is, or is there a spin that's being put on it?
Well, it should be talked about because it's part of our history, and all history, good and bad, should be talked about. We're not a perfect country, period. And has there been prejudice against certain races? Yes. So it needs to be discussed, and it goes back a long ways in various forms on it. So absolutely should be discussed.
You know, as I like to say all the time, you know, racism is so ingrained in the American society that when a ball player, takes a knee to protest police brutality, they think he's protesting against the national anthem. And it has nothing to do with that, except the time of the game, the time of the event that it happens. You know what I mean? Um, but yet and still, they change. It has been changed to, oh, that's not patriotism. He's against the national anthem. No, he's against people unarmed getting beat down and killed by the police. Period. That's it. That's all it is. So let's
I think
talk
he just
about.
wants. I think somebody like that. We just want to be honest about it. Okay. History is not just what George Washington chopping down the cherry tree or something like that. There's a lot more to that. There's some good things in our society, and there's some bad things. And the bad things we need to improve. We need to learn from them. How can we make that better? How can we make this society an equal opportunity world for everybody?
Karen, do you believe that parents that don't want their kids to know about the history of this country is doing justice for their kids?
Absolutely not.
Why?
How do you discuss American history without, as Charlie said, discussing the good and the bad?
Mm,
Let's tell how America was created, how each state was created, how these governances were created. The governance, the how do you talk of how do you differentiate when talking about critical race theory between embellishment of history and history? Tell the truth.
good point.
It is what it is. Um, Rosa Parks did experience racism sitting where she sat on the bus? Why not tell your children the truth?
Because
America,
I don't want my kids to feel bad about themselves. I don't want them to feel that white people have suppressed um, other people. They know they're white, and I don't want them to feel bad
Mhm.
about that.
Well, you know what I've learned over not too long ago, that other that people from other countries know American history better than Americans sometimes. And when we speak about different things that have occurred, especially race related, socially related, they can add to the conversation with a fact that but when you were speaking about it, you tried not to reach that subject matter with the person that you're speaking with. You just want to keep your comments, you know, at the top and not really deep with some people, because you're always going to find that person who is going to challenge, that this doesn't exist in America, that doesn't exist in America. And culturally, we have our own caste system,
Mm,
and we won't own it. We won't own it. And it's in all races.
okay, okay. Now I know that Kosho is dying to jump in on the caste system because I heard him talk about it just this past weekend. But before we jump into that, I do want to ask this question. When I was in school, I always heard about the government wanted to keep track of how kids were doing in school, black and brown kids especially. They wanted to know how we were doing, who was attending, following us from kindergarten all the way up through high school. The reason being so that they would know how to prepare the jail system. How many of us was failing? How many of us didn't seem to be cutting the mustard and would eventually end up in crime, end up in jail? And I call it now the school to prison pipeline. This is part of CRT, as well as denying black people and brown people affordable housing. I knew that this existed because as an adult, I've seen things, I've heard things, but I didn't realize that this was part of CRT as well. Also, the rates of death of black women because they can't get proper, what you call it, health care and other related abnormalities, shall we say, are all a part of CRT. Cultural. Is there anything else that could be put in this category that I may have missed?
You mean in terms of the effects of systemic racism?
Yes.
Well, one really interesting thing I read in one of the books on critical race theory has to do with Mexican Americans. The book cited a study of the health of Mexican Americans over several years. It found some very interesting data. The Mexican Americans who earned less and tend to live in Mexican American communities that were not mixed with other communities or with white communities, those lower earning Mexican Americans tended to have better health than middle class Mexican Americans who interacted with a daily basis on a daily basis with their white counterparts. And what that study concluded is that the racism that the middle class Mexican Americans faced on a daily basis, from outright discrimination to microaggressions, was taking a toll on their health. And that's what caused them to actually have poorer health than the lower earning Mexican Americans.
Mm.
So I think such complex factors and how they affect people is such an important thing to study. And that's why critical race theory is something that, everybody should be welcome to learn. We don't have to agree on it, but at least we have to talk about this.
And that's why we are here. Charlie, I want to jump back to the criminal justice system in the US. There's a lot of disparities, and they usually lead to negative outcomes for Black people. Since you're not a Black person, I'd like to get your point of view on this. The disparities impact every level of interaction with law enforcement, from initial contact to the arrest to bail to pleading to conviction to sentencing, incarceration, and even sometimes execution. Is this something that should be fixed? Should there be a retooling of the criminal justice system based just on those items that I just said? What is your feelings about that?
I think it goes back even further. As you may know, I'm involved with foster children. And so in the foster system, and I've been in the courts and I'm a volunteer there with a case I'm involved with, a disproportionate number of foster children are children of color. And from just extending off what you're saying on that, I would argue that goes further back. It starts with this whole thing because whatever reason is economic or whatever, we'll start with economics here, that the economic opportunity is not there, is starting at a young age where children, a disproportionate children of color are ending up in the foster system. And that correlates later with the potential of that happening. Again, because they do not have the resources out there. Just as a person who's older cannot get a lawyer, or a really good lawyer, because of course a real good lawyer is going to be very expensive, and things like that. I think it goes back literally to birth on that.
Mm. Okay, thank you for that. And now I'm going to ask Kosho if you would tell us about the caste system as it relates to CRT.
All right. One of the books I read, I'll hold it up here, although listeners can't see it. My fellow panelists can. It's called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. It's by Isabel Wilkerson. Wilkerson believes that we all see ourselves as being in a hierarchy, and that's just the nature of human thinking. We either see ourselves as at the top or at the bottom, and we will do anything it takes to make us feel like we're at the top. And even if that means hurting other people or even ourselves. And that's what propagates systemic injustice. Wilkerson doesn't even like to use the word racism. She thinks we should use the word casteism because it really taps into our hierarchical thinking. And in that book, she discusses three major caste systems, one being the caste system based on religion in India, dating back to antiquity, one being the caste system that the Nazis created in order to place races in hierarchies and use that to justify war and genocide. And then she talks about the caste system in America, that rose from 400 plus years of slavery and the after effects of that. So one thing that makes caste so insidious is that the people who think that they're at the top, they they do whatever they can uh, to make it others uh, feel that they are lower, lower caste, because that feeling of superiority gives those people at the top a spiritual nourishment that they can't get otherwise. It's really that feeling of power that is so dominating in human psychology, and I think that kind of explains why so many people are up in arms about critical race theory being taught in schools, even though it's not actually being taught in American high schools or grade schools. The people are going to these school board meetings to protest it as a way of enforcing their caste, the belief that they are in a higher caste. It's an expression of their belief of self superiority, and that's why they are so loud at these meetings. It means everything to them. It means more
Mm-hmm.
than the quality of education that the children are getting. It means more than national security. It means more than their health. The feeling of power is what matters the most. And that's and I think that is why racism or casteism, if you prefer to call it, is so pervasive, because it's so hard to let that lust for power go.
So even though CRT, as you said, is not being taught in the schools K through 12, states are using the term CRT and divisive concepts to pass laws that restrict or limit how teachers can teach, um, or not teach. And in many instances, it's just kind of vague what they can say and cannot say. Um, Now, as of August 2021, I couldn't find too much data, current data, but at that time, 27 states had introduced bills or taken other steps that would restrict how teachers can discuss, racism and sexism in the school. Now we know that in Florida, that's a hot state right now. The the current governor, he's all hell bent spewing fire about not teaching the kids certain things. How much power should the states have about what teachers can or cannot teach? I know that teachers have a curriculum, of things that they need to cover. But Karen, how much do you think the states need to be involved in that?
Whew, that's a good question because I'm looking at it from who's teaching
Mm,
history, because you have some people who are imparting their opinions about racism, whether it exists or not in the schools. But if critical race theory is not being taught to anyone from elementary school to high school, I don't understand. So, are you saying that when we talk about history, we're not talking about all the ethnic groups of who are non-white who contributed to history? Are we saying that everything just happened because it happened? Is this what we're teaching kids? I mean, the history books makes the history books make everything sound so easy and simple, but that's not how it was. A lot of non-whites struggled, not by choice. We had slavery, we had lots of slavery, and it wasn't just black people. We still have slavery, where people come to America, and because they have certain types of jobs, they're beneath us. You know, until we were honest about our history and what it really is, whether it's good or bad or easy to hear, we're always going to have these debates about race and what's being taught. And when your kid goes into the real world and finds out that things really aren't that way, how are you going to feel? Parents
Good
ask
point.
themselves the question.
Good point. And whenever it's funny, but whenever I check into a hotel, the people that I want to meet, it's not the people that's at the front desk. It's not the people that's going to handle my luggage. I want to know the people that's cleaning up. I want to know the people that's in the kitchen. Those are the people I always speak to. I always leave something on the desk for the maid and things like that, because those are the ones to me that do the work that nobody else really wants to do. And a lot of times they're invisible. But getting back to CRT, um, I recently saw a film clip of parents. It was somewhere in Florida at a school board meeting, and they were going nuts. They were asking, they just didn't want, race to be discussed in their schools at all. They didn't want sex to be discussed in the schools at all. And they didn't want to talk, as far as sex, they didn't want to talk about sexual freedom. Kids, boys and girls, had to be boys, had to be girls. They didn't want anything else. But when the reporter started questioning them, they didn't even know what CRT meant. They couldn't give it a definition. And it became so funny to me. I recently I recently pulled that up. I recorded it and played it on my DVR. They couldn't even tell the reporter what they were so angry about, why they were turning red. They had no definition for it. I think that's very telling that in this society people are like that and don't even understand why they're like that. You know?
Cal, if I can
Yes,
say something here, going back to
yes,
Carl's
sir.
comment earlier, about superiority. I think the superiority is based in fear. And there's the fear there. When you talk about that, and then somebody goes, you know what that means? Oh, I don't know, but what they really want to say, but I'm scared to death of it, okay? Because they're scared of it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but here's the thing that I'm trying to understand, because like here in down in Virginia in Loudoun County and different places in the southern part of the United States, parents are outraged, like you said. And if you don't know what it is, and when I was doing my research, it was very hard to actually pinpoint a definition for critical race theory.
Mm.
What I found out was this was a course that was taught on the college level. So I'm trying to figure out, when did it trickle down to the pre-college levels, with the kids in elementary school. We're talking to kids in elementary school. They have
Well,
enough stuff going on trying to learn, and they experience friendships with people of different cultures. So what are you as a parent saying?
well, I think the answer to that, Karen, is that it's true that it's not taught. CRT is not taught in K through 12. That's for the colleges and all. That's where it's mainly discussed and could be part of the um, curriculum there. But racism is taught in K through 12, that there were slaves, there was abolitionists, you know, right? So that is part of what they don't want their kids to know about.
But that's history.
It is history, no doubt.
And and if
But I don't.
that's Go ahead.
But I don't want my kids to come to me and ask, why did did we as as white people, why did we, enslave black people from Africa and bring them over here and have them doing our stuff? Why did we do that, mommy? They don't want to deal with that. That's a question they don't want to answer. And
Because
they
a
are
lot of
fighting
well, a
and
lot
they're
of people.
fighting
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say they're fighting Nailing to not have to answer that question. Go ahead.
Because they're dishonest. Dishonest people will always bring up, they'll always show up with guns blazing, as opposed to there's a way to explain everything to a child based on age. There's a
Well,
way to have, huh?
are they dishonest, or are they not wanting to put more pressure on their kids? Okay, kids these days have identity issues.
Mm-hmm.
They feel bad about their social environment. A lot of it they say is because of COVID. Those years when they couldn't be in community. I
Yeah.
really don't want to add any more pressure to them. Charlie, what do you think about that?
But
Well,
it's just, I'm
life is
sorry.
complicated, Life is
Life is
complicated. I'm not trying to
history.
make any excuses about it, but I'm just saying it's complicated. The reality of what things happen. And, I back 1,000 years ago when I was in school, we learned history and stuff a certain way, and some of that was not true. And I remember a few years later, I'll just give an example. When I went to school, the Vietnam War was going on, and we never studied the Vietnam War. It was a very controversial war. It did not end well, and history has shown that over time. So just and I don't know how the history books show the Vietnam War, how they interpret why we were there. We lost the war. America's not supposed to lose wars, and all that. So there's so many of them. I mean, that's just one example I'm giving, but and history is full of that.
I will add this, that it's harmful for children of color, for white kids, for our society not to provide an opportunity for these kids to think about these things, for these kids not to know these things or think critically about these things. Why? Because it could lead them to thinking, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. Okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be here, and everybody else is supposed to be underneath me. That's not right. That's not good thinking. Um, could also start thinking that certain people or certain groups deserve those negative outcomes. Okay, that whether they deserve it or not, that's the way it is. They deserve it. So I think it's important. I think it's dangerous for kids not to know what they need to know. And I believe that the parents are so up in arms, as was said, because of the caste system. Those that are in power or those that believe they're in power don't want to deal with it. Think back to the election and all these people that supported the 45th president for his re-election. They were asked specific questions. I love when reporters go out to talk to people at rallies, because that's when you really get the popcorn and you can sit back and just laugh for hours. They don't know what the hell they're even cheering for. They don't understand what the game is all about. Um, they have their preconceived notion that they can't describe. They can't tell you what it's about, but Yahoo, I'm in there, you know. So I'm going to ask now, we're going to get to the end of this, and, I'm going to ask each of you, what do you think we can go from here? Posho, I'll start with you. Take a few minutes. What do you think we go from here?
I don't know what else we can do but to continue engaging, continue to read and educate ourselves and others who will listen about critical race theory and systemic and justice. And we have to pity the kids who are going to schools that are censoring the truth from them because they're not going to be as prepared and as competitive as kids who are actually learning the truth. So we have to do our best to make these educational resources available. And although it's a shame that so many people across America are up in arms about this manufactured controversy of CRT, it's also we can see it as an opportunity to really strengthen the voices that have been silenced in the past.
All right. Very good. Charlie, where do we go from here?
Well, going from Coastal said again here, we have to constantly educate ourselves on this. I did this show today, and I don't consider myself an expert on this particular subject. We've done other programs, many of us, sir, and which I knew a lot about. And part of the reason I was on the show was to learn from the rest of you about this as well. And we have a diverse panel here. So, I'm educating myself as well on this. And we have to be, as an individuals, we are all individuals, we have to always constantly educate ourselves. Read things, read multiple things. Don't just read one random thing on the internet. Read several things, read different points of view on that. Come to your own conclusions. It's just like anything. And you've got to do that, if you want to be an intelligent human being in this world.
Amen. Amen to that. I definitely believe in reading both points of view or several points of view. It's only then that I feel that I can decide what is right or what is right for me. Karen, where
Yes,
do we
sir.
go from here? Yeah, where do we go? Where do we go from here?
I have no idea where we're going because just when I think that we've grasped some things and we're going to attempt to be better and do better and have more compassion, we don't. We don't. We have stunted the minds of the young people
Mm.
by trying to convince them that the world that they live in and the things that they see don't exist. It's not exactly like that.
Okay. Thank you for
Really,
that.
okay.
Oh, did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. We're good.
Okay, okay. And as the last word, I'll just say that feeling discomfort when discussing issues that are like racism and sexism, they're common. Okay, but if these inequalities are not unpacked and discussed, then young people will start to internalize, and these biases will seem to become a part of their mindset. That's why it's important for teachers and others to discuss, be able to be equipped to discuss these conversations in a responsible way. So I will leave that as the last word. And we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we will have our roundtable discussion, which will be led by one of the panelists. I'm not sure who it's going to be or what it's going to be, but we will be right back with Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Stay tuned. And we are back. This is Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. And now for this segment, we're going to go into our round table discussion. And it's going to be led this evening by our panelists, Charlie. Charlie, take it away.
Thank you, Calvin. Thank you, everybody. I've done one of these in a while. There's been one I've wanted to do for a while, but I'm going to hold on until some of our other fellow panelists hopefully come back soon. As you know, some of you know, I'm an Uber driver, so I get to take a diverse group of passengers around the Chicago area where I live. One night I picked up a young man, and I was just talking, and we had a conversation, and he was talking about, he was a musician. He was learning to play the keyboard and played rock music, and he thought he wanted to join a band. I said, well, you might want to look online for some areas to do that in. So he asked me about me, and some of you know my wife is also a musician. But getting to the point, we started talking for a while, and I was talking about her and not about me. And then he asked me a very interesting question. He said, "What's your passion?"
Oh.
I thought for a minute, and I said, "Well, I was involved in the arts. Some of you know I've been involved in theater and film and playing almost birthday parties and things like that over the years." So that's how I answered that. Although I thought of other things later, after Ryan had finished. So I'm going to ask all of you here, what's your passion? It could be a person, place, or thing, or an ideal, or something that you do, whatever it can be. It can be in any form that you want. And I throw that out to everybody. What's your passion? Besides the show, of course.
Who do you want to go first?
Who would like to go first? I'm open. Anybody ready?
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Calvin.
Well, for me, it's easy. My passion is words. When I fell in love with theater, it was all about being able to communicate to the audience. And then I started to learn how words can turn an audience on. It can make people cry or laugh or think about things. And that's when I started with Toastmasters. So now my passion is connecting with that audience and using my words to give them the benefit of the knowledge that I'm trying to share with them. So my passion is communication. That's it, Charlie. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Shaw, Karen? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'll give it a shot, Charlie. I
Please.
had to really think about this question really hard because I wasn't really sure what I'm passionate about. Is it food? Is it music? But everybody loves those things. I love them as much as anyone else. No more than that. But then Calvin mentioned words, and I thought about the words you would read in a book, and that led me to think about space. Actually, it's not that I gaze outside at the stars every chance I can, but it's something I think about a great deal. Humanity's future and eventually reaching the stars. There's a series of books by the late African American sci-fi author Octavia E. Butler, uh, in which she says heaven is not a place you go when you die; it's the literal stars itself, and the ultimate passion for humanity should be to reach the stars to ensure humanity's continued existence. So that should be the passion to reach heaven, not when you die, but as a living person in a space vessel. And that got me thinking about my job. I work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and we're passionate about protecting human health and the environment. And it's through protecting the environment that we will be able to last long enough on Earth to one day launch a vessel that will be able to put us among the stars. So that is my passion, space, and that is how I pursue it.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Karen?
My passion, and I'm not as passionate as I used to be about it, But my passion was to advocate for communities and people in communities who couldn't speak for themselves. When you're surrounded by a group of um, government officials who say a lot of things that sound good to the ear, but in actuality, they were unable to achieve. And when you live I live in a senior community, and a lot of the seniors, won't come out at night because they were afraid, that they might be impacted by a crime, which they weren't. But we had government officials that said some things, and a lot of the answers were yes, you can do it, and no, you cannot do it. They were building up dreams and making people believe that things could happen for them, and no, they can't happen. They're not going to happen. And they didn't care. They didn't care. And it was so bad. My words were so powerful that I was banned from meetings. I was banned because I was a researcher. And one of the things I always tell people about this was like I can't even tell you how overjoyed I was. There was a report that they wanted to submit, and officials signed off on it. It was like 2017, and the report was done in 2012. All these people saw this report, and nobody caught the dates on the bottom of the report. It was big as day. And it was about wasting money, spending money on a street project that was unnecessary. And they were very angry, very angry. Like, really? But I was happy I did it. And I felt so good. I was like, yes, because I fought for my neighbors. I created a petition to stop the project. I had every store in the community post the petition, and people who came in signed it. And that's how we stopped it. The government from doing their thing. But
Okay.
that's my passion. Unjust injustice. No, they can't prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to conclude on this, the one thing what I learned about everybody's passionate is how passionate all of you are about it. And I could feel that while I was listening to all of you. So thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Calvin, I'll send it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Charlie, for that very thoughtful round table discussion. I think I agree with you. Everyone was passionate about it, and yeah, Karen, I've been thrown out of places because of my words as well. Just ask my HOA; they don't want to see me again. But I've been thrown out of better places too. So
Yeah.
that's
I
so
think it sounds
that
like hundreds. Okay.
so anyway, that's going to be this segment of Diverse Talking Heads, y'all. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. I want to thank our panelists this evening. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Kaushal. Thank you, Karen. And it's always imparting that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here until the next episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Exit stage left.